Hi everyone, I am Dr. Anwesha Aditya. I am offering the course Petroleum Economics and Management in the NPTEL program. So, thank you everyone for showing your interest in the course. I would like to especially thank those who have registered for the course, enrolled for the course, but even if you have not registered or enrolled for the course, you can watch the videos, and I hope that you will find the course interesting and suitable for your purpose. So, we are in the verge of completion of the course. So, the exam is very nearby, and in the live session related questions, we have mostly received the questions related to exam. So, I will answer the questions first, but one thing I would like to tell you that if you have gone through the materials carefully, if you are watching the videos, and if you are going through the PPTs, because you see we have prepared the PPTs very in depth. So, if you are watching the videos, understanding the concepts, you are doing the assignments and you are going through the PPTs, I do not think that exam will be very difficult. So, go through all the materials that we have provided you, then exam will also be easy, and I would like to request you that you try to enjoy the course. Right, many of you are from non-economics background, from various backgrounds, and you are also working professionals, I know, and I have received very good questions in the forum and in the past 2 live sessions. So, I would encourage you that you forget about the stress of the exam, do not take it in that way, you try to enjoy the course. There is one course beyond, maybe beyond your curriculum, or even if it is you are a student of economics, that also is fine. So, try to have one area where you find the course very interesting, very relatable to the recent context. So, if you start enjoying the course, so exam will not be difficult. Okay. So, go through all the materials that we have been sharing with you, go through the videos very carefully, because you see we have also explained the in detail economics related concept which are required to understand the petroleum economics related issues that we are discussing in the course. So, go through the materials very carefully, and then you are half done for the exam, do not worry about the exam. So, this should be one course in which you should be gaining your interest in economics, you should be find it very relatable what is going on across the world. Okay. So, then the purpose of the course will be satisfied. So, regarding the questions I have received, so Ranjan Kumar has asked regarding the exam, do we have all the questions in MCQ form or not? Okay, so, the answer is the exam will be objective or MCQ based, and the NPTEL will inform you in advance regarding the pattern of exam. Okay, so, mainly in MCQ based, so do not worry about that. There may be small numericals, but that the answer will be in MCQ. So, it is not that you have to write long. Okay. So, you may have to solve small numericals, but those will be easy, and whatever we have been discussing in the lecture videos, all the questions are based on that. So, do not worry. Second question I have received from Ranvijay Kumar Mahato, what will be the weightage from assignment in certification exam? Okay. So, the TA has have answered to the questions that the NPTEL team has already told you that assignment weightage will be 25%, and we will be considering best of 8 assignments. Okay. So, best 8 assignments will be considered for your final evaluation or grading. Okay. So, I hope that the queries related to exam are cleared. So, thank you both Ranjan Kumar and Ranvijay Kumar Mahato. So, I will be happy to receive if there is any other doubts or queries regarding exam or any other anything else apart from the exam related to the course. Okay. So, this is our last live session, and we will be having the exam very soon. So, if there are any other questions, so please come up with your questions. So, in the last live session, means live session 2, we have briefly summarized module 5 to module 8. So, in live session 8 this live session 3rd, it includes module 9 to 12. Okay. So, in module 9, if you remember, that is module 9 is a continuation from the previous module 8, because in module 8 and 9 we have been discussing about the market structure in oligopoly. So, in module 8 also we have studied a little bit of game theory, very elementary concepts, and in module 9 we are studying the cartel model of price leadership and the price leadership dominant firm model. That means how the price, market price and the how much quantity will be supplied by, say, let us say OPEC and the non-OPEC countries. So, mainly the purpose of the module is that, both module 8 and 9. Okay. So, in the last class I mentioned, the last live session we discussed about module 8. So, in module 9 we start with the cartel model of oligopoly. So, means type of oligopoly, cooperative, competitive, and cartel is an example of cooperative oligopoly. So, we also have studied the conditions for a successful cartel and why the cartels often fail. So, we have compared the experience of OPEC vis-a-vis the experience of CPEC, and then we have studied the price leadership dominant firm model. We have studied it algebraically, intuitively, also mathematically, means how to solve with numerical examples. Okay. There may be similar problems related to those solutions. So, the way we have solved, there may be problems in your exam. So, practice such type of problems. Okay. How we have solved the price leadership dominant firm model and what are the conditions for success of OPEC. So, if you remember in one of the very earlier modules where we tried to explain the oil price performance from the point of view of OPEC. So, I think that was in module 4 or module 5 maybe. So, we discussed in depth the views from the literature whether OPEC is a successful cartel or not, and we also discussed about the structure and functionalities of OPEC and OPEC plus, how OPEC has evolved and now we have OPEC plus. So, there we have, in that module we have discussed in detail the views from the literature whether OPEC is a successful cartel or not, and we have found that the literature is inconclusive regarding the success of OPEC as a cartel. However, commonly we consider OPEC as a very successful cartel, but whatever be the case, we cannot deny the existence of OPEC, right, because many economists have pointed out that if OPEC was a very successful cartel, OPEC could have exerted its price power, the price of oil should have been higher, but OPEC did not do that. But many economists at the same time also pointed out that it may be that the OPEC's ambition was limited, and that is why OPEC was there for such a long time. So, we cannot, and it is still there. So, we cannot deny the existence of OPEC, whereas in other markets when we had cartel, those were successful, the price increased very much. Those cartels exerted the price power, but those were very short lived, whereas OPEC sustained for long time and it is still there. And but at the same time, you see, it is not a monopoly as we have discussed, because OPEC alone cannot supply all the total demand for oil. So, we do have non-OPEC supply. So, here in that module what we discussed, we mainly discussed the structure and functionalities of OPEC and the views of the literature regarding the whether OPEC is a successful cartel or not. Now, in module 9 what we are discussing, how OPEC decides the price, means a cartel model. So, we are studying the economic models of collusive oligopoly. So, one model is the cartel model, another is the price leadership dominant firm model. So, in price leadership dominant firm model, which also resembles the global oil market. So, a leader firm emerges. So, you can consider the leader firm as the OPEC, and but it is not the monopolist, because it alone cannot supply the entire market demand. So, we do have non-OPEC supply. So, we can consider these small firms as the competitive fringe. So, the dominant firm acts as the leader and is the price maker, and the small firms take the price set by the dominant firm as given and decides how much to supply. So, we have studied it in detail. So, practice those type of problems for your exam purpose. Okay, so, that was module 8, module 9 sorry, which is very important because it deals with the market structure of the global oil industry. Then if you look at the syllabus structure, so in module 10 and 11 we have discussed about some theoretical models, because you see this course, if you have a broad overview of the course Petroleum Economics and Management. So, it is a balance of empirical as well as theoretical concepts. So, we have been studying lot of empirical phenomena like the movement of oil price, like the experience of the resource curse hypothesis. So, on one hand we have been discussing about all these, but at the other hand we have devoted some of the modules to discuss about the theoretical models, the existing theoretical models to understand the global oil market. So, one such module was there in module 7 where we discussed about a theoretical model on structural change and resource discovery, and again we have discussed theoretical models in module 10 and module 11. So, there is one question that we have just now received. So, this course is running for the first time. So, there are no previous year questions. Yeah, that I understand, but as I told you already, do not worry regarding the exam. If you are going through the lecture videos very carefully, if you are doing the assignments, so similar type of problems will be there. So, if you are you go through the PPTs very carefully and listen to the lecture videos, try to have a clear concept, because as I was telling, suppose you have some numericals for your exam, suppose you have some numerical problem regarding the price leadership dominant firm model, but if you see we have discussed the solution in detail. So, we have started with the market demand, then the demand faced by the suppose the small firms are given, say non-OPEC supply. So, you can get the OPEX demand by subtracting the non-OPEC demand from the total market demand, right. So, and the cost functions are also given. So, suppose instead of in the class what we have discussed in the lecture video with some parameter values A, B, C, D. So, with say in the exam there can be questions with some specific numerical values, say A is equal to 40, B is equal to 30, in this way. So, if your concept is clear, I do not think exam will be difficult. Yeah, this course is running for the first time, I understand, but again there are some fast movers advantage also. So, do not worry about exam. This course should be one place where you should enjoy your learning, you should enjoy studying the course, you should be able to relate whatever you are studying in this course, you should be able to relate it with the current context. So, then I will think that the course is at objective of the course is served. Okay. So, do not worry about exam. If you are listening to all the lecture videos, your exam will also be going good. So, do not worry. So, just go through the materials very carefully, do not take stress on exam. So, if you are enjoying the course, you will definitely get a good grade. If you are into the course, if you are listening to the lecture videos very carefully, because we have see the lecture videos, we have explained each and every concept. Okay. So, do not worry about exam. So, you have seen the assignments, what do you think, the assignments were also quite easy, right. So, the exam will also be like that. So, do not worry. Okay. So, going back to what I have been discussing in modules 10 and 11, we have studied theoretical model. In module 10, we have studied the theories of price formation of oil, how price is formed over time in an intertemporal setting, because you see intertemporal analysis is very important. Intertemporal means, in simple word, intertemporal means over time. So, oil is something which you have at the beginning of the period. Suppose a country suddenly discovers resource, and then how to use it over time, because if you think that in future the price will increase, so we should not use it right now, then what may happen, there is some uncertainty, because you see uncertainty is very important, uncertainty plays a very important element in the market for oil. If you keep it entirely for future, it may happen that it may become completely useless, obsolete, there may be some technological breakthrough that will replace oil. So, it is not prudent to keep all the oil resource for future use. And if you use it currently, means if you finish, if you exhaust, because it is exhaustible resource, the amount that we have, and it is currently being found, but the rate of formation is very low. Okay. So, one point of time it will be exhausted. So, if you use it at a very fast rate, then you may run out of the resource, and it may happen that you are not able to come up with some alternative. We have seen the experience of Venezuela. So, you have to make a balance that you should not run out of the resource, at the same time you should not keep everything for future use, then it may become obsolete also. So, then how to distribute the supply of oil? So, we have what we have done, we have studied a simple 2 period model to discuss how to distribute the given stock of oil, and then we have seen that it is the pricing rule that distributes the oil supply, and in that context if you remember, we have derived the Hotelling's law that oil price increases at the rate of the market rate of interest, and then we also compared how the result will change when there is a cost of discovery of resource, because initially we have derived the Hotelling's law without any a marginal cost, and then we have added the cost, and then we have also compared the result with perfect competition vis-a-vis monopoly. And if you remember, if you go back and look at the lecture video, the very interesting result we got that the monopolist also chooses the same price path, which is a very striking result, because in all other markets the monopoly supply is less than a perfectly competitive supply. But here in case of exhaustible resource, we see that the monopolist does not gain by choosing any different path than a perfectly competitive market. So, the monopolist also chooses the same path like a perfectly competitive market. Okay. So, we have some more questions. I will come back to the discussion of the video. Okay. Raj Kothia, you have one question. I have one question regarding Nash equilibrium. How have you written Nash equilibrium matrix from the best response? I guess it should be response. Okay, response payoff. No, that is not the best response payoff. Best response means best response is so like CC and SS. So, the way you have written CC and SS are not best response payoff, right. So, this is I guess this refers to the battle of the sexes game, right. So, CC and SS these are not the best response payoff, these are the Nash equilibrium, and in that game you have multiple Nash equilibrium. So, what happens, you see, best response is what? Best response is best response of a particular player. Okay, first what we do in Nash equilibrium, we find out the best response of one player given the action or strategy of another player. Okay. So, what happens in the battle of the sexes game, say you are considering player 1 as the boy and player 2 as the girl. Okay. So, player 1 has two options, going to the cricket match or going for shopping. Similarly, the girl also has two options, going to the cricket match or going for shopping. Okay. So, what is the best response of player 1? If say the girl goes for cricket match, and then you are comparing the payoff that the boy is receiving from either going to the cricket match or going for shopping. So, you are finding out the best response of one player given a particular strategy of other player. Okay. Next, what you do, again you find out the best response of the boy given that the girl is going for shopping. So, you are finding out the best response of the boy if the girl is going for cricket match, you are finding out then the best response of the boy if the girl is going for shopping. Okay. So, in this way you are finding out the best response of player 1 given a particular strategy of player 2. So, you see the best response of one player will change if the strategy of the other player is changing. Okay. So, you are finding out best response of one player. Okay. Now, after finding out the best response of one player, you move to the other player, that is girl. So, you find out the best response of the girl given that the boy is going for cricket match. Then you find out the best response of the girl given that the boy is going for shopping. Okay. Now, where the best responses match, that is the Nash equilibrium strategy profile. So, Raj, the way you are writing CC and SS, these are the Nash equilibrium. Okay. So, by best response is actually the strategy which gives you the highest payoff. Okay. And you see that because you have state contingent payoff, right, because your payoff depends not only on your action. See, in the context of the battle of the sexes game, so the story if we follow the story, so the boy gets a higher payoff by going to the sports event, like say let us say cricket match, and the girl gets a higher payoff by going for shopping, but they both of them get nothing if they go separately. So, that means if you are going for if the say, let's say the boy, okay. So the boy is getting a higher payoff if the girl also goes for cricket match, because in that case, if you remember the way we have told the story, we have discussed the story in detail. So the boy gets 2 by going to the cricket match if the girl is also going for cricket match, and the boy will get 1 if the girl goes for shopping. So you see, your payoff not only depends on your action, but the action or the strategy of the rival. Yeah, Raj. So Nash equilibrium is a kind of strategy matrix, strategy profile. Yes, a combination of both player strategy, right. So when you are finding out, see Raj, when you are finding out the Nash equilibrium, so separately first you are solving, you are finding out, identifying the best response of each of the player, and then Nash equilibrium is the solution where the best responses match, because you see there may be other best responses also. So what the boy gets by when the girl goes for shopping, what the boy gets when the girl goes for cricket match, but not in all the cells the best responses will match. Only when the best responses match, that is the Nash equilibrium. And if you remember the way we derived the Nash equilibrium, so the first step was to find out where the best responses match. The second step was then we tested the Nash equilibrium. So Nash equilibrium is a strategy profile where there is no incentive of deviation. So now you see Raj, you will get the answer from your question. So if you are finding out the Nash equilibrium where the best responses match, obviously the players will not have any incentive to deviate, right, because you are at your best response. But if it is not a best response matching, which is not a Nash equilibrium, let us say if you think you take into account the prisoner's dilemma game. In the prisoner's dilemma game, only solution, only there is a unique Nash equilibrium. So there is a difference with the battle of the sexes and the prisoner's dilemma. In the battle of the sexes game, you have multiple Nash equilibrium, and none of which is Pareto superior to another, okay. In the battle of the sexes game, we have seen that both players not confessing can be the best solution. Not confessing, by not confessing the major crime cannot be proved, and their jail term will be less, so they will be enjoying more freedom. So going by the way we have written the game, both of them would have enjoyed 5 years of freedom. But you see, that was not the Nash equilibrium, because there the best responses were not matching. And that is why the Pareto optimum in the prisoner's dilemma game is not the Nash equilibrium, because each one of them has incentive of deviation, whereas in the confess strategy profile, which is the Nash equilibrium, both of them have no incentive of deviation, because how you are getting the confess strategy profile? By matching the best responses. Okay, that is the difference. So you see, there is a qualitative difference. In the prisoner's dilemma game, you have unique Nash equilibrium. In the battle of the sexes game, you have multiple Nash equilibrium. Now in the prisoner's dilemma game, the Nash equilibrium is Pareto inferior, and the Pareto optimum solution, that is both the players should not be confessing, cannot be sustained as a Nash equilibrium if the game is played only once. Now the answer will change if the game is repeatedly played, because if you remember in the class also we discussed, so we do see collusion in reality. So if the prisoners know that in future period also they will be committing the crime together, so then they can cooperate with each other by not confessing. However, in one shot game, cooperation cannot be sustained. Okay. So Raj, are you getting the answer to your question? So Nash equilibrium, I would rather say, I would change your question. So Nash equilibrium is a kind of, it is a strategy profile where the best responses of both the players are matching. So you are actually finding out the best responses, but best responses is not matching in the not confess case. So you see, then if you start with the not confess case, then you have incentive of deviation. So I would request you that after this live session, you please go back to that video of where we discussed about the prisoner's dilemma game, and then I think it will be more clear to you. Okay, but it is a very valid and interesting question. So if the game is played repeatedly, and that is how you can sustain cooperation, because you may then ask then how the players cooperate, because we do see cooperation in reality, and in reality you see in reality the games are actually played infinite times, because we human beings are obviously mortal, but we don't know what will be the last stage, right. So abruptly a game can end, right, if a person dies, so the game can end. So that means you don't know where the game will end. So and you see that business relations, we see that it goes on generation after generation. Okay, so because you don't know where you end, means where one person will die, so you take it as infinite time, so it is infinitely played game. But once you know the termination point, then it is not possible to sustain cooperation. Okay, so there is a famous theorem called the Folk theorem, which finds out the discount rate, the rate of discount or the rate of time preference. So that means if the individuals have a futuristic view, so if you put weightage on your future, then we often see that we are able to sustain cooperation. Otherwise, if you are just concerned about your present, then you will not bother about the future, right. So think in that way. So that's how you see in the Prisoner's Dilemma game also we took the example of Sholay movie, where each after every crime Jai and Viru committed, and after they were released from jail, they again cooperated with each other, right, because the game was played repeatedly. But in the model that we have studied, that's a one shot game. So like you can think of the examples in the tourist spot. In tourist spot, that you see often we do we buy very costly items? No, because you know that there is a chance that you will be cheated. And at the same time, you see in the tourist spot, no one will give you anything in debt, whereas suppose you stay in your hostel or even in your local grocery store, if you cannot pay at a particular point of time, so that person can give you, that shop owner can give you something in debt also. But in tourist spot that will not happen, right, because that is a one shot game, hardly the tourists come back, right, or even if they come back, not in the very near future. So you can think of that game as a one shot game, played only once. So in that case, you see you cannot sustain cooperation, because you cannot trust each other, right. So if you buy something very costly, you may think that there is a high chance that I will be cheated, and at the same time the shop owner will not give you anything if you cannot pay instantly, right, anything cannot be given in debt, which is very frequent when we go to the local grocery store or in your college canteen. Okay, so you may not pay instantly. So Raj, is it clear? So Nash equilibrium, in coming to your first question, CC and SS are the Nash equilibrium, they are not the best response payoff, they are the Nash equilibrium. Okay. So thank you for the question. It's a very interesting one, because see Nash equilibrium has huge application in reality. So I think we discussed in the class, in that video also, same model is applicable in the context of international trade. You see lot of trade barriers we often find out, right. Trade barriers is not only the tariff quota, it's see the restriction on factor movement, capital flow, visa regulations which restrict the labor mobility, these are also part of trade policy, right. So there are a lot of theories by the classical and neoclassical economists like David Ricardo, which says that free trade among all the countries is beneficial and the global welfare is highest possible. Okay. But then why don't we see free trade? The countries come up with lot of trade policies which restrict trade, even after formation of World Trade Organization, whose aim is to promote free trade, but we don't see free trade. Why? It is because of the unilateral incentive of deviation. So, it is an application of the Prisoner's Dilemma game. That means free trade followed, suppose you have two countries, okay, country A and country B. Free trade followed by both the countries is the Pareto optimum. However, the countries will end up imposing some trade barrier, which will be the unique Nash equilibrium of the game. So, in the battle of the sexes game, you do not have multiple Nash equilibrium, you have only one Nash equilibrium, unique Nash equilibrium, but that is not the Pareto optimum. So, both the countries imposing some trade barrier is the unique Nash equilibrium in that model, whereas both the countries following free trade is the Pareto optimum, total welfare is maximum, but why it cannot be sustained as the Nash equilibrium? Because again you see the way, if you find out the best responses, you will see that each country will have unilateral incentive of deviation. You think that you will be following free trade, however, if your partner imposes some trade barrier, your partner will gain at your cost. So, what happens, you see, the gains from trade theorem by David Ricardo tells that free trade followed by all the countries is welfare improving, and it is a positive sum game. That means both the countries will gain simultaneously. It is not that one's gain is another's loss, like suppose in gamble or game of poker, one's gain is another's loss, but that is not the case. So, those are examples, gamble and game of poker are examples of zero sum game, but positive sum game is where both the parties can gain simultaneously. Okay. So, you see what happens in the gains from trade theorem, both the parties, both the countries following free trade will achieve higher welfare than the no trade situation. So, they are not gaining at the cost of their partner. However, suppose one country is following free trade, and if you impose some barrier, your welfare can be greater than the free trade level of welfare, and that generates the incentive of deviation, just like the prisoner's dilemma game. In the prisoner's dilemma game, you see why can't collusion be sustained, because the prosecutor promises the prisoners that if in a situation that one prisoner confesses and the other one does not confess, so the confessor will be going completely free, he will be free, he or she will be freed of both the charges, whereas the one who is not confessing will be jailed. Same logic applies here. So, you believe that you will be following free trade, but your partner will impose some trade barrier. So, your partner will achieve a higher level of welfare, but you see this welfare gain of your partner by imposing some trade barrier will come at your cost, because your partner will gain, but the gain will come from your welfare loss. Okay. So, that means will you sit idle? No, the countries will, the partner country will also retaliate. So, reciprocation and retaliation is very important in the context of international trade. So, you see both the countries will see that both the countries have unilateral incentive of deviation. So, it is the individual economic agent's best interest. So, that is the importance of Nash equilibrium. You see, once it is a Nash equilibrium, you do not have any incentive of deviation, even if both of you are not doing good. You could have done better, but from there you have the incentive of deviation. So, only the Nash equilibrium has the property that every player can predict it. Okay. Otherwise, you cannot do sustain. Okay. So, best responses will match. Okay. I hope this is clear. So, Nash equilibrium has wide application in game theory also, in collusion. See whether the players will collude or not. So, again same thing, we have the Cournot model where collusion is a better solution. Means collusion means suppose you have say two firms duopoly market. So, by colluding means you are sticking to the monopoly output and profit. However, we see that is the Pareto optimum, highest possible solution, means profit that the firms could have enjoyed, but they do not do that, because that is not the collusion will not match with the best response. The best response will be to stick to the Cournot-Nash level of output, which will be greater than the monopoly output. Now, see if output is higher, so what will happen? We have studied some basic concepts of economics. So, if your supply increases, demand falls, and then extremely sorry, if supply increases, price will fall, then profit will also be less. So, Cournot-Nash equilibrium will be the unique Nash equilibrium in the Cournot model. Cournot model is a simultaneous move output competition. So, again collusion cannot be sustained if the game is played only once, okay, because collusion can be the Pareto optimum, but that is not the Nash equilibrium. Okay. However, again if the game is played repeatedly, then we can find out some threshold level of discount factor whether, and we can see whether collusion can be sustained or not. So, that is called the Folk theorem. So, in some advanced game theory related model, so you can study Folk theorem. Okay. So, in our course we could not do that because of time constraint. So, thank you Raj for very interesting question. Any other question? So, as some of you are asking about previous year questions, so this is the course which is running for the first time, so we do not have previous year questions. So, but as I mentioned, do not worry, you go through the videos and all the materials that we have been providing you, then obviously your exam will be good. So, do not worry about exam and grade. Okay. So, I have been before taking this question, I have been discussing about the module. So, in module 10 and 11 are theoretical models. In module 10 we studied intertemporal pricing. So, the pricing allocates the amount of oil which is to be consumed over time. And then what we did in module 11, we studied a model of economic growth. So, first we studied a simple model of economic growth without any resource discovery. So, we proceeded step by step. We studied the concept of steady state, golden rule, modified golden rule, where we incorporate the rate of time preference. Then in the next step what we did, we introduced resource discovery, and we found out how resource discovery can affect the steady state golden rule and modified golden rule, and we saw that resource discovery can to some extent relax the burden of capital accumulation, because the country is now richer. Okay. But then in next what we studied how uncertainty regarding the future price of oil can affect economic growth. So, we saw that it depends on the nature of preference of the consumer. Okay. So, how uncertainty about future oil price. So, if people are very uncertain about future oil price, there can be possibilities that the rate of extraction of oil can increase also. Okay. So, we have studied these models in detail, and finally, if you remember in the last module, that is module 12, we studied a very important concept of exchange rate. So, because in case of oil, see, exchange rate is very important, because we have in the very first lecture we have motivated our course by saying that oil is one of the most traded commodity, right, or even you consider the services also. So, oil is very important in global trade. So, that is why, and when it comes to exchange with the rest of the world, when a country is engaged into transaction with the rest of the world, so your domestic currency will not do. So, then we have to know the concept of exchange rate, which is one country's currency in terms of another country's currency, and we discussed about different types of exchange rate, and our focus was on oil price, how oil price shock will affect the domestic economy under different types of exchange rate. So, first we studied the sources of demand for dollar and supply for dollar. So, we took the example of rupee dollar exchange rate, but you can think of in terms of any other exchange rate. Okay. So, we discussed about clean float, managed float and dirty float, and we discussed about the impact of oil price shock under each of the regime. And then we discussed with respect to the Indian economy the role of oil in triggering the balance of payment crisis. So, see, it is very important to learn from history, because unless you know the history and what happened in the past, unless we learn from the mistakes, and then we cannot proceed forward. So, we studied a little bit of Indian economy post independence, what are the strategies followed, and then how that led to the balance of payment crisis that India suffered in 1991. And what was the role of global oil market? So, we talked about the oil price shock due to the breaking down of the then USSR. Then we also saw the Gulf War, how all those affected the Indian economy's demand and supply for dollar, because both the demand for dollar and supply of dollar was affected. And then what was the importance of the exchange rate policy, the pegged exchange rate regime that India followed after independence. And but we saw that facing the crisis, India had to come up from the crisis by taking loan or tied loan from the World Bank and IMF. And we also studied mainly the exchange rate reform policy. See, this is again a very vast area, and we do not have time to do that. So, what we did, our purpose was just to see the importance of global oil price shock in affecting the domestic economy. So, we took the example of Indian economy, and then we studied how the exchange rate policies could help to some extent solve the India's balance of payment crisis. So, how we moved from dirty float or the fixed pegged regime to a managed float. Sorry, we had a under overvalued peg T. So, how from peg T we moved to a dirty float or managed float. So, we studied that we studied the concept of LARMS, liberalized exchange rate management system. So, That was done in module 12, and then in the very last lecture, I think in 2 lectures we summarized the entire course. We talked about some recent upcoming issues like the fossil fuel subsidies. So, and then we discussed about the relevance and the importance of the course. So, you see there is a linkage from the very first module, module 1 to module 12. So, we started with discussing in module 1 the importance of having a course on petroleum economics and management, and the very last module we again tried to build that linkage, that what is the importance of the course and what is the way forward for the use of oil. So, that is very important, right? What we are studying, if we are studying something, there should be a purpose. So, the purpose is what should be the future of the oil industry, what should be the way forward. See, is it only to increase the supply of oil? No, because we have seen that the COVID-19 pandemic have shown us that increasing only the supply may not be sufficient, because if you are facing a sudden demand side shock, then if you are not able to manage your supply, then also you can face a oil price shock, right? During the COVID-19 pandemic, we have discussed in detail how the WTI future price contract became negative. So, that should not also happen. So, we should create proper storage facilities, and also at the same time we have seen from oil endowed countries perspective, like Venezuela's perspective, how it ran out of oil when the inter-economy got dependent on oil. So, we have to learn from these experiences, and accordingly we have to move forward, not only for the Indian economy, for the world as a whole, because this energy is so important, right. So, we have discussed all these emerging issues, and from both the perspective of oil endowed countries and oil importers, like say India is a major importer of oil. So, we should look at these issues from both the perspective, and we also discussed about the north south conflict regarding energy and sustainability, greenhouse gas emissions, and the exhaustible non exhaustible resource use. So, we have discussed everything in detail. So, now in today's session we have received mostly questions regarding exams. So, I would request all of you, all the students who have enrolled for the exam, that do not worry regarding the exam, go through the materials very carefully, whatever material we have supplied to you, and practice the assignments. So, I sorry that I cannot provide you the previous year questions, because the course is running for the first time, but I do not think that it will be a problem. So, if you have enjoyed the lecture videos, if you have gone through the materials, if you could relate to the concepts, then exam will be good, you will get a good grade. So, do not worry about it. Okay. So, this should be one of the subjects or one of the area where you should not be burdened with the stress of exam. Sometimes what happens, we take so much stress of exam that our joy of learning is lost. So, do not do it this course, and then only I will think that the purpose of offering the course was satisfied. Okay. So, thank you once again everyone. So, if you have any more questions, you can come up with the questions or anything else to answer, anything else to interact. Of course, the forum is of course there, even if our live session ends, we will always be there in the forum. So, if you have anything to ask, you can write in the forum, you can even mail us, me or the TAs. So, feel free to get in touch with us. So, thank you for everyone who has joined the live session. We had all the 3 live sessions very successfully, because at the last 2 live sessions also I received very interesting questions. So, I thank all the participants who are joining the live sessions.